I hope you're having a great Thursday so far. I'll allow a couple seconds for people to join. Feel free to have your camera on or off, although it is nice to see people. I understand that sometimes when you're at the school, things are going on in the background. All right, well, welcome. If this is your first time at one of our Montessori Leadership Town Halls, then welcome. We're happy that you're here. We host these every Thursday throughout the school year as a space for Montessori school leaders to come together. My name is Camilla, and we're also joined by Julia, who's our new community manager here at Montessori Thrive. Um, we're here today to talk about telling your Montessori story, how to communicate with parents who don't get it yet, who don't understand yet the value of Montessori, or maybe have misconceptions. Um, I thought this was going to be, a great topic to have now because I visited a bunch of schools in the past month. I attended a conference where I met a lot of school leaders, and I'm hearing across the board that we have some new challenges. So, when I started working with Montessori Thrive, the challenge was COVID and overcoming everything that the pandemic brought our way. And now it seems there's a new set of challenges, a big one being free TK. A lot of schools are facing low enrollment. If you're not facing low enrollment, then congratulations. You're definitely, um, lucky because I feel like we're seeing a lot of that across the board. Um, so I thought this would be an opportune time to talk about this. Um, a little overview of what today's topic is going to cover. So, first, I want to make sure that we understand the challenges that we're facing within the Montessori space because there are a couple of new ones. There are a couple that have been around for many, many years. Um, I also want to make sure in this presentation that people have new ideas for how they can craft their Montessori story. So, yes, Montessori as a philosophy has been the same for over 100 years, but um, every Montessori school has its unique story, its unique mission. So, how can you take from both and create a really unique story that motivates parents to join your community? The third is going to be showing that Montessori works. How can we effectively do this? Because the reality is that we are competing with free school. We are competing with new TK programs that are accessible for all. And so we really need to be very clear with parents in a way that is understandable to them um, about why they should pick Montessori. What is their takeaway? What is the return on investment that they're going to get if they choose a Montessori school? And more specifically, if they choose your Montessori school. Strengthening your communication strategy, I think, is going to be a really important thing moving forward for all Montessori schools. It seems that we are being challenged on multiple levels. We're being challenged by the state. We have the challenge of competing with other daycare programs, with other private schools, with public schools. We have to break all of these misconceptions that are out there about Montessori schools. We're also often competing with Montessori schools that aren't really following authentic Montessori. And so that gives us another challenge that we have to address. Um, so having a strong communication strategy and story is important. And the next is how can we collaborate together? We can reflect on what our challenges are currently. What are we doing in order to address these new challenges? Maybe we can share some ideas and work together because we're all passionate about Montessori. We want to see as many Montessori children out there as possible. So, how can we work together on that? As always, these town halls work better when people are collaborative. We understand that you might not be able to unmute yourself, but use the chat. Feel free to ask a question or share an idea because your idea and your question could be very helpful to another Montessorian on the call. Our main goal today in this conversation that we're having is when parents truly understand the Montessori difference emotionally, practically, academically, they see it as not an alternative, but as an investment in their child's lifelong success. Ultimately, we want people to understand that it is so worth all of the time, all of the effort, all of the financial investment that they are going to make it committing to Montessori. So how can we effectively share that? First, let's address the challenges and feel free to comment any additional challenges that you're noticing because the more we know, the more we can, provide resources to help. But a big one that I am seeing is the universal free preschool program. This is something that is expanding nationwide. I think it can be a really good thing for parents that, previously were really having a hard time accessing daycare. But ultimately, we also need to recognize that that was never our target audience, or maybe it was, but in a different way. Um, our target audience are people who are open to something a little bit different and who are a little bit more understanding or willing to listen about how important those early key developmental years are. So we've always been competing about free school, at least in other programs, at least in elementary, at least in adolescence. Um, so I think, it's a little bit of a panic right now because it's new for those, toddler programs, for the kindergarten programs, for the primary programs, but it's not something that is the end all of our Montessori programs. Parents are faced with more free options. That puts us in a position where we really have to refocus and re-strategize on justifying the tuition. Why should a parent go put their child in a Montessori toddler program when there's now a free option? Well, you have to be very, very clear as to why they would want to do that. Tell a very compelling story about how important those key developmental years are. That is the first 6 years of life are the most important developmentally. That's when the child is learning the most rapidly. You want an environment that is going to support that learning. So finding ways to tell that story very authentically in a way that makes your Montessori look like the best option. And we feel that Montessori is the best option. Many parents don't get Montessori yet. They might see it as mysterious, or they might even see it as outdated, which is crazy because the world around us has changed so much. But human development in the past 100 years really hasn't changed that much. The way the brain works and develops in those first 6 years hasn't changed all that much. So why should our approach change? Why are public schools changing year upon year? Why did I learn different things than my parents did in a public school setting? Things like that. Those are questions that they open people up to understand that, Montessori has stayed the same for a reason. Um, Overall, your mission is to communicate the true long-term value of Montessori education. We can't compete with free. You know, at the end of the day, it's $0 versus maybe $20,000 a year. It's a significant difference for families who, might not be in the best economic situation right now. I think everyone across the US is having some, it's just a challenging and expensive time. So we need to acknowledge that. But I think that there are still parents out there who will understand the quality, the outcomes, and the purpose of what we do. And for that reason, it's worth the investment for them. So the questions that we're noticing parents are really asking, whether it's, they come in, they do an info call, whether they come in for a tour, whether they come in for an open house. The general questions that we hear a lot are, why is Montessori so different? They might see the environment and they don't understand what they're looking at. They might ask questions of, why do you have this like this? Or why is, how does a child select work? Or how are lessons given? Will my child be ready for kindergarten or ready for public school? I think this is a big question that we get is, there is a fear that Montessori children will not adapt well to traditional environments. And that is a valid concern because, we want our children to be well adjusted to the world around them. And eventually they might have to work in an office or they might have to go to a university that is structured differently than Montessori, or maybe they need to transition to a public school at some point. And a parent really needs to understand that a Montessori child is going to be fine when that time comes. And you need to have evidence to back it up, whether it's a story to tell of a past student who excelled in a public school environment following their Montessori experience. what colleges children ended up going to from your school if you have kind of older programs like adolescent programs or high school programs. Um, you need to have the evidence to back it up as well when you make these claims. And then why should we pay when there's a free preschool nearby? They might not be asking you that question, or maybe they do, but you have to answer it regardless when parents come in for a tour, when they come in for an open house. Let's acknowledge that there is a free product out there, but let's also acknowledge its shortcomings. What does it lack that we offer here as a Montessori school? And why should you want to invest in a Montessori school when you have the free option? So, a big question that I think moving forward we're going to be answering a lot is, can I trust this approach to give my child the best start in life? And your story should answer that, not with jargon, but with clarity, confidence, and heart. I think these are going to be very important overreaching messages moving forward. And at Montessori Thrive, we help schools with marketing and we, you know, heavily rely on digital marketing. And I get a lot of calls from schools that are nervous, and rightfully so, because their enrollment isn't what it used to be, or they're seeing a drop off because of these new challenges. And, you know, I wish I could say there are quick fixes like, oh yes, we'll run some Google ads and people will come. But I think the problem is a little bit deeper now, and I think we need to have really strong stories and compelling stories, and messaging needs to be consistent in order for people to actually apply because getting them through the door isn't necessarily enough anymore. I think schools are getting inquiries or tours, even if it's less than what they had before, but it's how many of those people end up signing up that we really need to take a look at is if you have a high tour to conversion, so the people that come in for a tour sign on for your school, then I think you're doing probably a very effective job in telling the story. If you're noticing a lot of people coming in for the tour, but then they ghost or they disconnect or they're just not as present with your school anymore communication wise, or they just decide to go somewhere else, it's so important to get feedback from families. At past town halls, I've talked about how valuable it is to, every time someone comes in for a tour, let them know to fill out you're going to send them a post or a questionnaire. Understand why they maybe didn't go with your school. Try to figure that out. Try to diagnose it because it will allow you to improve your messaging and your overall communication because it's very, very important, I think, moving forward. Getting people through the door isn't going to be enough when you're competing with a free product. This brings me to the power of storytelling. I think, people remember stories much more than they remember numbers. I do think statistics and data are important, and I'm going to talk about that in a couple slides. But any compelling, moving story that you have to share on a tour, when parents ask questions, I think it really strengthens the case for Montessori. Um, and people, they really need an emotional connection, especially when it comes to, their children and where they're going to be leaving their children for most of the day, before they can engage intellectually. And I think this is oftentimes what happens in Montessori schools is we're so passionate about the pedagogy and the philosophy, and we did years of training, you you speak Montessorian very well and you understand the science behind it so well, but to someone who doesn't know about it yet, it's really going to come across as intimidating. Um, they might not be ready to receive that type of information yet. And when a parent comes into a situation thinking, oh, this is going to be, especially for these younger programs, I think especially for, infant, toddler, primary, they're going to be excited about hearing the science behind it. But is my child going to be in a loving environment? Are they going to feel cared for here? Um, how passionate are these educators about the students? That is crucial. And I think sometimes in Montessori environments, when parents come in for a tour, we're really leading with the science and the pedagogy, and we're giving them a history lesson of Maria Montessori. while that's really important and beautiful, I think what's most important is making an emotional connection somehow with that parent so that they understand how passionate you are about Montessori, how happy your students are there. Are they thriving? Those are things that matter. So share real stories. A student who found confidence through independence, any story that relates that. I feel like we have hundreds to tell in Montessori. A family that stayed because they saw growth and joy. Maybe you had parents that didn't get it at the start, and then 3 years later, they are, very, very passionate about Montessori and they're, spreading the word and they're advocates for Montessori because they notice such a difference in their child, even though they had their doubts at the beginning. A teacher who brought the Montessori philosophy to life. Your teachers are the heart of your school. They play such an important role, and realistically, the child is going to be with that teacher for 3 years. So the relationship there is really important. And parents notice. Parents notice how the teachers are with their children, if they're receiving um, love. I've heard my own stories about parents who maybe don't feel that their child is being supported in a Montessori environment. Some have said, "Oh, it's a very, very traditional Montessori environment and there is no warmth." I notice that the teachers don't give any warmth. So it's important to have your ear out for these things because maybe that's not something that we teach in training. But if it's important to parents, then shouldn't we be doing that somehow in a way that's still authentic to Montessori? So listening, being able to tell those stories, um, in Montessori, learning isn't just about academics, it's about growing capable, curious humans. I think that's something else that we do better than anyone else. And we can talk about why we can share our stories. Um, I think that really resonates with um, parents. I'm not sure if she's on the call today, but our amazing CEO, Donna, she was an educator for 24 years. And she's really got a gift for this, for kind of telling powerful stories about Montessori. And every time a parent asks a question, like what is the difference between, public elementary or private or and Montessori elementary? We could go into the science behind it. We could talk about the curriculum, but that's not really what a parent will take away. Instead, she chose to say, well, let me just tell you my experience. So I had a son who went to, Montessori elementary and then one that eventually moved on to public. And here are the differences I noticed. When they did a play in an elementary Montessori environment, the children did everything from casting the play, from trying out to designing the costumes to designing the sets to even picking what play they were going to do. They were involved in every step. They marketed the play, they sent out flyers, they designed the flyers, they promoted it to parents in the local community. In a public elementary, adults did most of that. They controlled the casting, they controlled the tryouts, parents made the costumes and made the sets. And the teacher selected what play they would be doing. And so the students, they showed up, but there was a big disconnect. They didn't understand just how much of a production it was. And those are stories that resonate with parents because that is the much bigger picture of what Montessori is. So, without going into scientific terms, without going into detail about the pedagogy, here's the bigger picture. Would you rather have your child in an experience where they're going to know everything top to bottom, they're going to understand things on a deeper level? Or do you want an adult-led environment where the children are being fed information and then they're being kind of observed and tested over just the more basic things? Um, so I think those are the stories that resonate again with parents who might not get it yet. This brings me to crafting your Montessori story. Um, I think having a core message is really important and asking yourself the question, what transformation does your school create in children and families? Because it's not just the students that transform in our communities. Oftentimes, it's also the parents. Most Montessori schools offer parenting support. It's our communities. People make friends for life in the Montessori schools that I've been to, at least, or that I've observed. So, these are things that you can share, whether it's on your website, whether it's when people come in for a tour, when they come into an open house. What do you offer just beyond a place for them to, leave their kids? Use simple, accessible language, avoid Montessori jargon, and focus on benefits. I think sometimes we don't notice when this is happening because we're so used to using our verbiage and our vocabulary in Montessori. But here's just an example, we emphasize sensorial work and practical life. If I'm a parent that doesn't know what Montessori is, I don't understand what that means. You're telling me that you prioritize children wiping tables and sweeping the floors? What is the purpose behind that? It feels very foreign to me, and I don't know if I can trust that, and I don't know if I am, willing to choose that over a free option because it's very, very abstract to me if I don't know about it yet. Instead, kind of try to shift the verbiage to your child will build focus, because ultimately that is what practical life is about. They will, build independence and confidence through hands-on experiences. So wiping a table isn't just wiping a table. And here's why. And that tells a much deeper story. And it allows parents to see the bigger picture of the work that the student is doing in the classroom and how it translates into them being, better citizens and better, more adjusted humans overall. Lead with emotion, support, and evidence. I think it's so important that the person who is giving tours or leading open house conversations with parents, they know how to do this well. Because again, it's being able to get people through the door. I think the Montessori name often can do that. Our beautiful environments can do that. Our website, our social media can get people in. But once they're there, do they feel the emotional connection? Can they feel confident about leaving their child there? This is a very, very big investment and a very big ask with everything that we're competing against nowadays. I think using data is also more important, and it might not be important for every family. Some people are much more emotionally driven, but I think that there are people out there that care about the numbers, especially when it comes to making an investment. Um, there's a reason Ivy League schools charge so much and people don't really care and they go anyways, because when you graduate from an Ivy League school, the world is opened up to you. You're successful just by being a graduate of that school. So it's very easy for parents to understand the return on investment that they're going to get with that. What is the return on investment that they're going to get when they send their child to a Montessori school? Um, what's great is there are a lot of people out there doing research and it is backing our philosophy. I was in a conference in Houston, Texas this past weekend where the keynote speaker talked about the research that she's doing. She's based in Virginia, and I'll see if I can remember her name or look it up and share it in the chat at the end of the presentation because this is the kind of data I think is really important for schools to share with parents. Um, about how they discovered that the 3-year cycle works and it is effective. They don't know the why behind it, but the fact that the children do the most of the learning during that 3rd year. That backs what we've been saying. Or that children that even have just 2 years of Montessori education are better adjusted adults and feel more content with their life. This is data that has been researched, it has been proven, and it's what we've been saying for so long. And some parents, they really do like to see these numbers or this information or this research because they want to know that what we're saying is true. We're not just, blindly following a philosophy that was created 100 years ago. Um, there's a reasoning behind everything. Maria Montessori was a scientist, and everything that she did was based in her research and her experimenting. And data today proves that it still holds up. So it's important to highlight that. Um, talk about retention and alumni outcomes. Those students that stayed for the 3rd year. What did you notice about those students by the time that they finished and completed the 3-year cycle? What about students that didn't? Did you have the student come back? They went to public kindergarten and they didn't feel like they were being challenged enough and they went back to complete the 3rd year in Montessori. That's a very telling story that backs what you're telling them because telling them, oh, this includes kindergarten, by the way, um, and them not really seeing the bigger picture why or not having data to support it, it's also a big ask for someone who doesn't yet understand it. Um, Kindergarten readiness and long-term success. I think this is a really important thing to have information about because the majority of Montessori schools have a primary program, and it's very common for schools to lose children to public schools, um, you know, before the kindergarten year or right after. And there's a big concern about will my child be ready to be in a traditional school after being in a Montessori classroom. And we need to have information ready to back that, whether it's testimonials, stories, data. It's a good thing to have a combination of things. I actually encourage schools to do like a moving up night or a presentation for parents so they understand the importance of the kindergarten year and we can really go into detail about why it's so valuable. Um, Use before and after examples, what changed for children or parents. And any kind of data that you can visualize, infographics, short impact blurbs, alumni highlights. And there is research out there that you can find online that provides this information. So I would recommend researching it if you're giving some type of presentation or you're at an open house, so that parents can take it away and they can see that we're not just people that are claiming these things based off of what we're observing in our schools. This has been observed in multiple environments. Let's see here, I have a question here. Keynote. Montessori is not preparing kids for traditional public spaces, but more importantly for life. What we can do is training them in ways to be confident, capable, independent, and independent thinker for life. Absolutely. And that's a very, very good point. Um, let's see here. This is the Montessori. Thank you, Dolores. Dolores was at the conference with me, just for sharing that Montessori study that I was referencing. Again, it's always good to have these types of things to reference back because they back what we're saying. Um, I do still, however, um, think that it is important to say that ch Montessori children can be adjusted into traditional public spaces. Our aim is not to adjust them, to prepare them to be adjusted to that, but there is a big concern that is out there and a big misconception that children that are in Montessori will not perform well in public schools. And that is holding people back from signing up. So I think, and college too. College too is a big concern because parents are thinking about college nowadays from very, very early on. Um, so I think, addressing multiple challenges, multiple pain points of entry for parents. Um, Specifically addressing the free TK programs that are popping up everywhere because this is going to be an ongoing challenge. And I don't think it's a new one for TK programs, but it's not a new one for Montessori in general. We've been competing with free daycare, not free daycare, free public schools for forever. So it's really, really important to have plenty of information that parents can easily access and can easily understand about the key differences between our programs and these free programs that are coming up. And every state is going to have kind of different outlines for these free programs. So I recommend kind of doing a deep dive into what are the free programs like in your state? What is the setup? How long have they been around? Is this their first year? Do you want your child to be, are you going to gamble the most important developmental years of their life on a program that is not yet established, that is not yet grounded, versus a program that's been around for 100 years, that works, that is science-backed? Um, so these are the stories that we need to be able to tell really efficiently and have resources ready to hand out to parents. Be able to tell effectively when parents come in for a tour, or even check out our website. Um, we need to position Montessori as the long game. This is something that is backed, it has been proven, it has been researched, and it works time and time again. Just look at some of the most successful people out there. A lot of them were Montessori kids, and there's a reason why. It's really about investing in your child's future. So yes, we're competing with a free program, but we offer a very unique experience that is not like the traditional. It is heavily researched and has been proven to work because again, human development hasn't changed that much. I really recommend simplifying it as much as possible with infographics or compare and contrast charts. I think that works really well. So for instance, here, here's what you're going to get in Montessori education, and you could even explain a little bit more why. Um, on our sample school website here, thrivesite.com, we actually like to include that on the admission and fees page because we recognize that tuition and fees is probably the biggest entry point for parents when it comes to signing up for a Montessori school, especially now with the free TK program. So we like to put that right there on that page to really reiterate that it is going to be a value-led decision. So here's what you're gonna get at a Montessori school, and here's what you're going to get if you choose a traditional school. And you can get really specific with your local programs. I think that makes it even more reliable for parents when they say, oh, well, in the state of Texas, the free TK programs have this, this, and this wrong with them. But our Montessori, you're going to have this, this, and this. So you're addressing the problem and you're planting the seed there for the parent to ask the question at home, what do I want to do with these key developmental years? Yes, it might be an investment. It's $20,000 or that I wouldn't have had to spend if I could just send them to the free pre-K, but it's going to be so worth it when I have a well-adjusted adult child, um, one who is thriving in any environment, one who has a passion and love for learning. So again, I think it's just being able to communicate that in an effective way. It's really important. So I recommend having resources like this. If you need resources like this, we do have a couple of free handouts on the community site. If you go to hold on, it's community.montessorithrive.com, and if you sign up, we have a resource collection. It's 100% free to join. These are two handouts. So we have here Montessori versus daycare. What is the difference? And again, you can edit these, you can rework them, you can just use them as inspiration. I would recommend having your logo there, making it really personal to your school so that parents are under the impression that you created this document. The other one is maybe the benefits of the 3-year cycle. Again, these concepts that might be, you can explain them simply in a story or answer the question on a tour, but you can give them the resource so that they can dive deeper and they can learn, they can do their own research because they likely will be if they're making an investment in their child's future. So if you're handing them resources and you're, again, backing what you're saying, I think it really helps to effectively tell your story. Yep, so feel free to download any of these, but these are some good resources to hand out. It's nice to have something. And um, recently I had the pleasure of going back to the Montessori school that I went to as a child, and they were having an open house, and yep, sending parents home with the folder or content that it teaches them about Montessori, but within your school, within your community, it also tells your story a little bit. Having them go home with something, I think is really important and really valuable. Um, it never hurts. So I would recommend doing that. How to talk to parents who don't get it. And some parents never will. Um, our old executive director, Camille, she said a quote once, and I'm sure she ran a Montessori school for many years. She said, Montessori is for every child, but it's not for every parent. And I think there's truth behind that. Not every parent is going to get it, and that's okay. But I think it's good to have a couple of strategies in place to make Montessori not seem intimidating, to make it seem approachable, and to make parents feel welcome to learn more, invite more thinking. Because really, on the tour, what you're also doing is you're planting a lot of seeds for them to ask questions later about these free TK programs, about these other private schools or public schools. Why is it like this in a public school if this is what science is saying? What is the science behind what they're teaching in public schools? Because there's a lot of science to back Montessori. So by planting those seeds and providing resources, you're helping to tell your story much more effectively because on a 45-minute tour, it can be really hard to say everything. Um, Focus more on the emotional connection on that tour and showing your passion, and then, send them home with resources and with some questions to ask. and let them come to their conclusion with your guidance. I think that really does make a difference, and it makes you seem more approachable. Like you're not trying to tell them everything they don't know, because that can also be very intimidating. And um, it was funny, one of the one of the schools I visited, they were like, "Oh, everyone thinks we're a cult." And sometimes I feel like I can see why, because we're so passionate about our messaging and we want every child to have Montessori. But it is so foreign to people that don't know. So I think combining quantitative data with quality stories is really important. So having the science, because we are science backed, but also what are the success stories that you've noticed over the years? You can find a middle ground and you can appease parents that are more emotionally driven and more data driven. Talk about retention and alumni outcomes. I've had presentations in past town halls about maintaining alumni communities. If you can stay in touch with your alumni or have some way for them to come back to the school, whether you keep in touch with their parents, tell parents to send them, graduation cards. It's so important to keep track of how, where they go. I was at a conference I went to, the Montessori High School. They had a bunch of banners of all of the colleges that those students ended up attending. And you see Stanford, Yale, UT, which is a great school, and you think this is where my child could end up if they go to the school. All of these things are really important because parents are really, again, this is a long-term investment. If your child even goes to Montessori for 2 years, they're going to be happier, well-adjusted adults. That is not something that free daycare can guarantee. So these are the stories, again, I think it really will resonate with the parents that are going to be right for your community. So having those alumni outcomes is really important. Kindergarten readiness and long-term success, I think is also important to have. How are those children going to adjust, whether they go to a public school, whether they go to another Montessori school, whether they go to a traditional private school? How do they adjust and perform afterwards? And testimonials from families who do get it, I think is really important. And have ways for those parents to be involved. Um, I think we always invite parents or prospective parents to come in and observe, or maybe see like what the morning work cycle looks like, to see for themselves everything that we're saying. But I think it's also really helpful for them to maybe be able to call up a current family. Maybe you have a list of phone numbers from parent volunteers who are willing to answer questions to prospective parents so that they feel that they're getting the real insights and they're not just talking to your school and hearing it from you, but they're hearing it from other parents who have lived what you're preaching. Use before and after examples. What changed for children and parents? Maybe you have a parent that their child was kicked out of a bunch of schools, or they really struggled to adjust to other environments, but they thrived in a Montessori environment because it's a child-led environment. We're not trying to mold your child to be exactly what we think they need to be. So stories like that are really powerful as well. Visualize data with infographics, short impact blurbs, alumni highlights. Again, I think having a way to come up with this content in a way that's digestible is really important. That's why it's great to like hand out folders or packets with any kind of infographic, compare and contrast charts. Maybe you're in an area that has a lot of Montessori schools. Maybe you can give that parent an observation chart. Here's what to look out for when you go to a Montessori school. Notice notice how organized their materials are. Something Donna always said is, the first thing I look at when I go into a Montessori classroom is their pink tower. Is it pristine? Is it stacked correctly when it's put away? Is it cared for? Are the materials taken care of? So you can, if your school does these things well, point them out so that parents know what to look out for when they're looking at, other schools. I think it always helps to guide parents as to, what are you looking for? Um, Visualize, oh yeah, I said that. Data tells a story of Montessori success, and your families do bring it to life. So again, feature as many family stories as you can. I think all of these things are really valuable. Building consistent credibility is going to be also hugely important, and it will strengthen your message. So align how your website, tours, social media, and team describe your school. So if I were to visit your website and then I visited your school, am I seeing consistencies? Um, does it feel like authentic? Like if I visited your website and I saw one story and I was really blown away and I scheduled a tour and I saw a completely different reality, as a parent, that really builds distrust. What else are they not telling truthfully? Everything needs to be consistent. Social media as well. At this open house that I attended, we asked parents, or the head of school, I was asking parents how they found out about the open house or how they found out about the school. And there was two responses, and not a single one was Google, which is surprising because that's what it used to be almost all the time. The first one was social media, specifically Reels. The reason why Reels is because it has a much further reach. So we know Instagram is pushing video content, but they felt a connection with the reel that was created. Um, that, it was the head of school talking about Montessori, showing the classrooms, and they saw that reel and felt so connected to it that they felt that they wanted to go to the open house or they wanted to go for a tour because they're like, I need to see more of this school. So that's a great example of how telling a story authentically, just showing your school and trying to connect with parents where they are is hugely important. And the other response was ChatGPT. So people are using AI to find schools to register for. So what that means is that the content, what we have written on our website, is hugely important because AI draws from that. So do we have information about what Montessori is on our website? Do we have information that we are a Montessori school? What is if you have any accreditation? Because some parents they're searching what are accredited Montessori schools. If you have any type of accreditation, feature it. Even if your staff are accredited, but your school is not, that is still a very, very prestigious thing that sets your school apart. So all of these things you want to make sure to mention. So it was an interesting kind of in-person case study for me to see that it's not necessarily Google. So again, from a digital marketing perspective, that's what we do. Um, we're always trying to see where parents are. They're craving stories and connection. They want to see what you have to offer is different. Why should they make the investment? It's not enough to just be in front of them, but you have to tell the story well consistently. Have great branding, have great imagery, authentic imagery that is reflective of your school. These things really are going to resonate and have to be there, especially when we're competing with free. We have to be the prestigious choice. Um, Make sure every touch point reinforces the same value and tone. Again, find your tone. Maybe your tone is very friendly and approachable. Maybe your tone is more calm and peaceful. It's really important to have a brand and be consistent with it because I think, again, it tells your story authentically and who you are and who you want to be. I think it's also very important to train staff to communicate the Montessori difference with confidence and warmth. Whoever is giving the tour, whether it's yourself as the head of school or administrator or it's somebody else, maybe it's a guide, whoever is going to be interacting with prospective parents, have a workshop where you talk about what messages you're communicating, how you answer certain questions. It's going to make them feel more prepared, especially if it's a guide, because what I find is guides are so special with children. They love to be in the classroom, but sometimes, they don't like the part of their job where they have to talk to parents as much. Some do, but that's just a pattern I've noticed, and that's okay. They're there to be with the children. But when you empower them and you give them the tools and resources to talk about Montessori to parents and adults, it's going to make your school more valuable. So training them to communicate this message, whether also for observations, things like that, workshop these things, because I think it's really worthwhile. Um, that when someone comes in for a tour, they're receiving consistent messaging and they're getting things in a way that is digestible if they don't know about Montessori yet. Um, I think those things are hugely important. Some tools and strategies to make this happen. I think website messaging is crucial because realistically, that is probably one of the first things they're going to see. So even if you're marketing it on a banner, let's say That's the first thing they see is actually the banner. Really, the first impression they're making is when they go to the website. Again, is the branding consistent? Are the colors the same? Is the imagery consistent? Does this feel aligned? People are very, very attuned and sensitive to these things nowadays. And the brands that are really successful do this well. And I think it's important for our schools to do it well as well. Benefit-driven copy. There's a reason why on our websites, on the homepage, because this is the page where we're just trying to capture their interest. We don't have big walls of text. We're just talking about the benefits, very, very surface level, because we can expand on this so much more when we meet them and we can tell our stories in a moving way when we meet them. Parent tours. I think this is a huge, huge, huge focus moving forward. How can we improve our tours? Maybe in the next couple of weeks, we're focused on getting feedback post-tour so that we know what we can do better. Because it's one thing to get them through the door, but then we have to seal the deal. And it's hard to be in a sales mindset when we're Montessorians. It's not really our natural default. But we need to be able to, maybe sales is not the right language. Maybe we're storytellers when people come in through our door. How can we tell that story effectively? Did you have children that were Montessori kids? How did you feel about that? Really connect with them and hear what they're struggling with. Listen to what they have to say as well. I think being really sensitive to parents nowadays is important and it always has been, but I think there's a lot of anxieties to, what school they're going to pick, what's the best for their child. Nobody wants to mess their child up. They want to make sure their child is set up for success. So you're there as, a guide for them as well. Printed materials, I think this is really important. Use great photography, quotes, having something that they can physically take home to learn more about Montessori and read up on it. They do this in college tours because college is not cheap and you're making a big investment in your future. You'll never show up to any college tour without a tote bag or a folder of information. I think the same should be said for Montessori. It's really good to have that, we did a series of free events for Montessori schools in the West Coast, and we printed out these little spiral booklets. We wanted them to be really beautiful because we feel that Montessorians appreciate that. And I think everyone appreciates that. And it's much less likely to end up in the trash that way. We, it had like a plastic cover, it had a spiral. We designed it with our logo on the cover. We had a table of contents for the information. It's a resource that you can create once. And I think each booklet cost about $2 to $3 to create, like to print out at Staples. Those are things that, they resonate, they get passed around the parent community, parents learn from it, it builds trust with your school. So those things are worth the investment. So I think I would say instead of investing in Google Ads, which are expensive and now are showing to not be as effective, invest in physical print materials that you can give parents and focus on really telling your story. Invest in good graphic design so everything is consistent and well branded and professional and beautiful. Um, Community outreach, share articles, host parent education nights, and feature alumni voices where you can. I think that's amazing. Um, Being out there and visible, being a pillar of your community is going to be important. So yeah, there is this free option, but look at this Montessori school and look at all the work they do. And I always see there's a stand at the farmers market where the children, the adolescent children are selling the honey that they have on their farm. And it just looks so cool and something that you wouldn't find in a public school. All of these things, they tell a story um, that will set you apart. So I always recommend doing things like that. All right, let's open it up to just general discussion. These are just some conversation starter questions. So, what's one message about Montessori that resonates with your families? What's been your biggest challenge in explaining Montessori to new parents, or are you noticing any unique challenges? And do you have a story or strategy that has worked really well? So, I'm just gonna leave it at that and see if anyone wants to share.
I'd like to share. My name is Lisa Edmondson. I'm at Daycroft School in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We've been here for 57 years, and for 57 years, we're not sure why our founders started us with 2-year age groupings. We go through 6th grade. Last year, we implemented our primary 3 through 6th, and we're currently trying to educate our families about the benefits of the 3-year cycle for our elementary students. Because we know what it is, right? And it makes sense, and it's proven, and it's very interesting trying to educate parents who are highly educated that this works. And it's also very telling. Some people will say, I didn't come here for Montessori. And so now it's like, right, well, like this is our mission. Like you're not a mission appropriate family. So it's baffling that although this is tried and true, we know that trying to convince parents that this is what is the next step has been a real challenge. I'm sure everybody on the panel is already in a 3-year cycle. Um, but
Yeah, that's a struggle because I guess it goes back to leadership and having to communicate that the mission and the whole point is to have it aligned with what Maria Montessori said, and then you have the parent community to address as well. So that's tough to hear. We're not here for Montessori. I think for that, I'm leaning more towards the research based. And seeing what's out there research wise. It's really going to come down to that because I find that when a school is based in an area where a lot of the parents are very highly educated, most have at least a bachelor's degree, most will have a master's degree, or have these um, high paying, high position jobs. They really love data a
mhm,
lot and
yeah,
research.
that's what we're finding. But even when we give them the research, they have a rebuttal and they say, this is perfect. This is a perfect environment. Why would you want to change anything? And so just educating them that yes, we have a wonderful school. We're not short on numbers. Everything's going great, but this will be better even for your child. And they don't want to hear that.
That's a tough one. Yeah. Is anyone else on the same boat? Well, I'm meeting with a lot of schools lately, Lisa, that are struggling with filling up their adolescent programs. And I think they're noticing the same thing that you are. Um, and that's something that it always pains me so much because I'm great at giving advice on, oh, this is your digital marketing strategy. This is what you should do. But it's so much deeper than that. It's such a deeper diagnosis. It can't be fixed with like Google ads or just running more marketing flyers or thing. It has to be an on the grounds kind of constant effort of engaging with parents, showing them research, showing them, success stories. And it's a lot of work. I wish there was a better way. And I think hopefully in years to come, there will be more information about Montessori out there. And I think it could be better recognized. I would love for organizations like AMI and AMS or any Montessori accreditation to be doing more work to educate the general public. I think that would really help us.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if they have any initiatives in place because it's really hard for the school to also always be doing the talking because it's for parents, it's like, oh, well, you would say that because you're the school. So
Right.
it's having those other resources out there brought in. It's not just us saying it.
Right.
This is all the other people that are saying it.
Right.
Um, Here, can you explain to your parents that AMS accreditation requires the 3-year cycle? Was that question for Lisa or for me? Parents that- Oh, you mean like the multi-age. So to have an AMS accreditation, they require you to have the 3-year cycle. Is that
This is Joelle and Zach's. That was for Lisa and the Daycraft. I don't know if that would be a compelling
Sure. So
information point from.
we're an Isaac's accredited school, and so we have some AMS and some AMI teachers here. So
Okay, but don't gen. Well, Good
It,
luck.
it's the same for AMI. They do require that 3-year cycle, so it goes aligned with both accreditations. Um, and I do think it does come down to whenever you do a change in school, I think you face resistance, you know? So it's kind of swimming against the currents Yeah. a little And bit. we've done a lot of surveys, town halls, meetings, one-on-ones, just a lot of hand holding.
Mhm.
And there's that small group who keeps trying to rally. But it's a wonderful transition for us. And we're moving to a middle school in 27, 28. So, and we're the only one in our community for that too. So a lot of great,
Good.
exciting things.
I wonder, Lisa, if you ask them why are they resisting to the idea of having the mixed age group, right? And the benefits that that brings to your child when they're exposed to the older and the younger, and maybe they can share. Maybe they have already shared their resistance, but it would be interesting to see where it's coming from.
Some of it is they think that their third grader, right, will not like the babies in the class, the first graders. However, some of these same families have come from our 3 to 6, so they see what that's like, and that's not the babies, it. So, but again, it's just a lot of hand holding and massaging and comforting, and we'll get there.
You will get there. Yes. Any other questions or just anything that someone wants to share about maybe the challenges that they're noticing? I know we're up against a lot. I feel like can also be a space to just vent. It's a safe space for school leaders. So what are we noticing? I, I think a challenge that we have noticed over our school has been here 51 years, so we have seen a decline in enrollment probably since COVID. COVID was probably the culprit, but it started to slowly dwindle. We do have, thankfully, this year a big group that registered in the toddler community. We're a small school. We have one toddler community and 2 primary environments. And we've always faced the 3-year cycle situation. I think we put some things in place in order for that to avoid that, although we still lost a few last year. But one of the issues that I think we're facing is parents are looking for convenience. And when you drive along to our area, there's lots and lots of daycare centers or glorified daycares. There's a lot of the Montessori word stapled around. So again, I think it roots in education. Parents don't know the difference between what a daycare looks like and a real Montessori, an authentic Montessori looks like, or so I don't know. I'm just trying to educate the 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 area where I'm because they don't when they walk into the school for a tour. Some look for the accreditation, but some are they just don't have any idea or they have misconceptions about what Montessori is. Hmm. Hmm. That's where the messaging really needs to be aligned from, whether they found you on social media, whether they found you on website, whether they come in for the tour. Everything needs to kind of be coherent and consistent and approachable. Well, thank you everyone for sharing. We'll be posting this on our YouTube channel later today. So if you want to review the recording of the presentation, it'll be there. Just look for Montessori Thrive on YouTube. We post all of these there on a weekly basis. Next week, oh, I also like to put oh, key takeaways. I think we took away, I hope we took away all of these things. And I'd love to see, throughout the weeks, if you want to revisit a topic like this one, just let me know. We can always see where we're at when enrollment season comes around in January, February, March. I know those months are pretty hectic. Future town hall topics, if you want to discuss anything at all, please feel free to reach out to our wonderful community manager, Julia. Her email I will drop here. It's julia@montessori.thrive.com. She's going to be planning our future upcoming town hall topics. So if you have anything you'd love to see, just feel free to reach out to her with any topic requests. Next week, we're going to be joined by Rupali Sharma. She's a fantastic community member and a head of school for the tech schools in Massachusetts, an amazing Montessori school that we have had the pleasure of visiting before. She's going to be talking about using AI tools specifically within a school leadership frame. So, like, what can a school leader day to day utilize AI for? You know, what does she use it for? I know she's pretty tech savvy, but it's good to have these tools that are available to us and can save us time. I don't think there's a single Montessori school leader that isn't thinking I could use easier processes and more time. So hopefully that will be a helpful discussion next week. And we'll be off on Thanksgiving, of course. We don't expect you to tune in. Please disconnect and enjoy with your families. Um, yeah. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining and everyone who shared questions and experiences. We really appreciate all of you.
Camilla, real quick, I think Lisa had another question.
Oh, thank you.
I was just going to mention on that topic of the AI, our head of school, we do a Net Promoter Score survey every fall. And this year, our head of school, which would have taken him 8 hours of time to go through and suss out like where are these comments coming, he did put it in AI and it was able to come, you know, like break everything down and then see like actually this is the very small percentage of these like outliers who are not in favor of this net thing. So I'm excited to see that next week's town hall.
Awesome. Yeah, I think AI is great. And even for people that are not like really technologically savvy, it's more accessible than you think, and it can really save time. I'm glad you brought up that story because it's great and a lot of it is free. So yeah, I hope it'll be helpful. I thought it would be a good topic to bring to the forefront, especially as we're getting close to enrollment season and a very busy time for us. So hopefully some time saving hacks with AI. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I'll check for any final questions. All right. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.